This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Confederation Club of Kitchener-Waterloo's March webinar. Our goal is to bring Canadian digital politics and community to life. My name is Barb Shackleton, and I'm the Confederation Club President and your host for tonight's webinar. I will also be joined by Mark Maurer, who also serves on the Confederation Club board, and will be introducing our guest, as well as Stephen Cage, our Speakers Committee Chair, who will be conducting the Q&A later. This evening, we have the pleasure of being joined by Tim Hudak, CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association, who will be speaking on the Ontario housing market, which is very hot. But before we dive in, just a few items of interest to mention. We are recording this evening's webinar, so you can share it with your friends and family, and we will be posting it to our YouTube channel and at confederationclub.ca. Also, if you wish to submit a question, pop it into the Q&A box, and Stephen Cage will moderate those questions. We will be prioritizing questions that have come from our members first, but we might be able to squeeze yours in as well. So let's get started. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the generous support of Mark Maurer and his team in sponsoring tonight's webinar. Without his sponsorship, it would make it much more difficult for us to be conducting these webinars, and increasingly it's becoming really a cornerstone of our community. So thank you, Mark, and the Mark Maurer team. So a little bit of background.
Thank you,
My pleasure. A little bit of background about the Confederation Club of Waterloo. It was founded in 1976 with Joe Clark as our first speaker about a month before he became party leader. Our speakers have included past Conservative and Progressive Conservative Prime Ministers, Brian Mulroney, Kim Campbell, and Stephen Harper. Keeping this illustrious tradition going, we aim to continue with the legacy of hosting future Prime Ministers, Premiers, politicians, and all individuals that underpin our great country to give us a real voice. Without further ado, I will now ask Mark to formally introduce our guest speaker. Mark, take it away.
Thank you very much, Barb. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored tonight to introduce a very timely guest. Of course, with the real estate market on fire, it's great to hear from Mr. Tim Hudak, who is the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association and has been since 2016. He came to us after a 21-year, actually very stellar career in politics. And he has done an amazing job with RIA. He set out to transform it into one of the most cutting-edge real estate organizations in America. It's by far the largest real estate organization in Canada, with over 81,000 realtors. Mr. Hudak's leading now. Mr. Hudak has two daughters, Miller and Maitland, although I'm not sure how old they are. I don't think they're infants at this point. Mr. Hudak, we appreciate you here tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Tim Hudak.
Well, thanks so much, Mark. Great to see you again. Thank you for all that you're doing as a leading realtor, what you do for the profession, you and your team, and how you're helping out people who live in Kitchener-Waterloo and those who desperately want to live in Kitchener-Waterloo area. And Stephen, good to see you again. I really appreciate, our past relationship. When Stephen reached out and said, could you come to the Confederation Club? I leapt at the chance. It's good to be back to the Confederation Club. I know you folks have done a fantastic history, as Barbara outlined, in leading the public affairs debate and great sessions. And I was thrilled with the chance to come back when Stephen reached out to talk about, well, I think it now has surpassed COVID, hockey, and the weather. And that's the status of real estate and home values in KW in our province. So what I'd like to do, if it's good with you, and I'll ask you this, Mark. I've got a brief presentation that I'll call up as a PowerPoint. I'll go through it, and then what I love to do is just open the floor to Q&A, or if you have any suggestions for me in my capacity. Is that suitable, Mark?
Absolutely. And if I can start out with a question, Tim, I was going to ask you, what made you decide to plant yourself at AREA in 2016. And what was it that made you decide to accept the presidency of the organization? That's a big task.
Yeah, well, sure. I'll take that question right off the top. Thank you for asking. And you asked about my daughters Miller and Maitland. So Miller is now 14, grade 9. And which you know, as a dad, shocks me. It's too soon. I'm not sure if I'm ready for this, but she is, and she's excited. And Maitland, the little one, turned 8 yesterday. 8 yesterday, and we had a little birthday party. But the downside is, her big present was a friggin' goldfish. So, which I was enthused about. But she loves her fish. With respect to you know, why I took the job. You know, I always had a very compelling interest in home ownership. And, you know, Mark, you're very generous in your comments about my political career. And Stephen and I worked very closely together in those days too. And I always had, when I was PC leader, some very strong home ownership policies. I just believed in it. And that comes obviously from public policy background, but I know how much it changed me. When Debbie and I bought our first home in 2002 in Niagara, it changed me as a man, right? I cared more about my home. I invested in it. I cleaned it up. I cared more about getting to know my neighbors and developing a relationship with my neighbors. We both got more involved in the community, volunteered. And with my other hat on is, you know, an economics background, economists will demonstrate that people who are homeowners, all else constant, jobs, salaries, health, whatever, their kids tend to have better outcomes in school. They get better jobs. They have better health outcomes. Like, it has a fundamental reinforcement of the social fabric in our country. And it's been a great story about Canada, how every year more and more people could afford to be homeowners, that every generation had a better shot at owning their own place and raising their family than the generation previous, until about 2016, and then started going downhill. So when the job came open at the Ontario Real Estate Association to be the CEO, and I was leaving politics, I leapt at the chance. It was another exciting way to get your feet when they hit the floor every day, that you're excited about the mission you're on, creating that next generation of Ontario homeowners. So thanks, Mark, for asking. That's really what motivated me. And I was also happy to say that coincidentally, after 21 years as an elected official in public office, I had done my sentence. 21 years is more than they give you for manslaughter in this country, my friend. So I got out for good behavior, and the two things lined up quite nicely. All right, let me open up my my screen here for you. Oh, you know what? I've been disabled. I should have checked that beforehand. So if you don't mind enabling me to share my screen, and I'll just get through some data about what's happening in the province of Ontario. Mark would have a lot of insight then on what's happening in the local market, and probably answer questions better. And you're gonna get a chance, you know, getting somebody from the Kitchener-Waterloo Association of Realtors. They're one of our top real estate boards in the entire province. So I'm sure they could give you a great presentation on the ins and outs of what's happening in the local market. I talked about, for Mark's question, about what home ownership means, what it means for Canada. And the other thing, right? It's where we're at our most comfortable. It's where we can be ourselves. It's our most precious memories. It's where we raise our families. And reinforced during this COVID pandemic, it's a place of safety and security. So in the immortal words of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home. Home ownership has been a cornerstone of a prosperous province and our country of Canada. What it does for you as individuals, what it does for families, and its economic activity, nothing compares to home ownership, the importance to Canadians, and the importance to our economy side by side. But today, and you're seeing it big time in Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, we're facing an unprecedented affordability crisis. So here's some data province-wide. Housing prices rose, but, you know, in a pretty steady level for most of the last decade. And then bang, right around 2020, you saw a significant acceleration in average prices in our province. And look at that. In February of this year, the average home price rose to over $1 million. And that's not Toronto, folks. That's actually in the province of Ontario as a whole. I can't see all of you, but You know, I'm in my early 50s now. Like, I never would have dreamt, like, $1 million home. That's what, you know, Thurston Howell on Gilligan's Island could afford. And now the average price in Ontario is $1 million. Here's a stat Mark will be very familiar with, and many of you that like real estate will be as well. This is a tool that realtors use to show how much inventory is in the marketplace. So think of it this way: if nobody listed their home starting tomorrow, nobody else wanted to sell, how much could the existing listings last? How long could they last? And that's what you call what this graph shows you. So if it's high, it's a buyer's market. So there's lots of homes out there. You can pick and choose and take your time. If it's low, it's a seller's market. Not much for sale, so the sellers have command. We are at a record level of low inventory in our province. And Mark could probably tell you more, but I suspect in Kitchener-Waterloo, it's at unprecedented levels of being a tight market. Lots of demand and not much supply. So what's driving that demand? Well, homeownership is a great investment. We know that. It pays off over time. Number two, you've got a massive movement now of the millennial generation, which is the largest generation now in Canada's history, moving into the years where they're getting promoted, they're getting married, they're having families, big time coming to the housing market. And associated with that, the bank of mom and dad is playing a big role. Their parents, the boomers, the wealthiest generation in Canada's history. They deserve it. They've worked hard, they've saved up, but they're helping to finance purchases of their kids as well. Immigration returning to Canada after we're getting through the COVID crisis, low mortgage rates, and we're a great place to live. I don't know how to break this to you. The secret's out that KW, Cambridge, is an awesome place to live too. A lot of people coming your way. All of that combines to significant levels of demand, but we don't have the supply in the marketplace. Basic economics through Laurier will tell you high demand, low supply, prices go up. Here's another interesting number, and I should update this for 2022, but you can see here the blue line is a growth in home prices in our province. Green is a growth of average incomes. So home prices are going up far faster than the average income. So no wonder people are getting frustrated and slipping further behind. How do we get in this mess? Well, I talked about the demand side. That's good, right? You want to have more people buying homes, more people moving to Kitchener-Waterloo or the province of Ontario. We're having millennials who are being more successful now. That's a good problem to have. Supply side, for decades, we did not build enough new homes to keep up the demand in the marketplace. At AREA, we believe we need about 100,000 starts for new homes per year, particularly for starter homes. Also for move-up homes. This is when the kids get a bit bigger, you need more space, you want to have a yard, all that kind of stuff, and rentals. So we have fallen far short of 100,000 homes per year. I can get into the details why if you like a bit later on, but we were actually building fewer homes in these decades than we did in the 1970s, for goodness sake. So no wonder we fell behind. The yellow is colored like the sun because there is some bright news. We actually are seeing some progress, more on that later, but we did see an uptake in 2020 and 2021 that shows the government is making some important progress on new starts, more work to be done, but we finally did hit that green bar this past year. I'm happy to see that and optimistic about the time ahead, but a lot of catching up to do. All right, so home prices in Kitchener-Waterloo area, what's happening there. And again, Mark and your local board can give you a lot more detail. But CREA, that's our national association, collects information from our local board. Average price in your area, $1 million, $5,000. Look at that, eh? Where was it February 2021, $750? If you're a homeowner, I guess that's good news. If your daughter went to Waterloo, she got a degree, she got a good job, but she can't get out of your basement, bad news for her. Prices have gone up by almost 33% this past year in KW. We see a lot of people coming your way, and your local realtors can tell you more. Moving into the area from the GTA, your success in the economy, your post-secondary, your high quality of life means you have become a magnet from folks, particularly from the GTA, moving to your area. All right, so is this a KW problem? Is it a Toronto problem? It's actually a problem in every corner of our province. I suspect some of you grew up in Kitchener, and it was a time when, you know, if you worked hard, you did the right thing, you saved up a few bucks, You aspire to say, I could at least get a home in the neighborhood I grew up in. That should be my target. If I can do better, great. That should be my target. Same with me coming from Fort Erie and Niagara. But whether you're in a small town or a big city, that dream is slipping further out of reach. Home prices have meant that folks that believe they could buy a home in their home neighborhood, that's slipping away. So what are the perceptions? And I'll share this with you. And Barbara said she would send it around. Please click on this link if you want more data. This is pretty hot information out of the field with Abacus polling. We said, all right, let's get to the bottom of this. Where are citizens on this, average FECAL, as we head into the provincial election in June? We also want to measure the bank of mom and dad. We've all heard about it. I referenced it about 5 minutes ago. How deep pocketed is a bank of mom and dad? Does it really exist? So we asked them. We found out that for new home buyers 18 to 38, 4 in 10 received financial assistance from their parents, the bank of mom and dad. Of those parents, 60% dipped into their own savings, whether general savings or borrowing for the retirement fund. They love their kids. They're proud of them, but God bless them. They want them out of the house and into a place of their own. Then they can work on the grandkids, right? But you're seeing a substantial support from the older generation for the younger ones in the marketplace. 90% say it's harder to get in, and they're right, than it was when they were that age. But here's the bigger number. So how much was that average gift? This is money to help with the down payment, and Mark will verify that. It's not usually the mortgage. Right now, it's the down payment's the bigger obstacle. 74 grand. That was a gift. That's the level of an average gift from a parent to their kid to help them finance a home. And then sometimes on top of that, almost $41,000 in loans. That's what they told us when we asked them. So you see the size of the generosity there. An issue here, they have the right to do that. They should do that. Hopefully I'll save up enough to help Miller and Maitland get in the market down the road. But it does pose a very serious public policy question. If you come from a family that's decently off, if you come from a family that owns a home and benefits from that value, you've got better odds of getting the market. But let's say you come from more modest means. You're a new Canadian. You're an entrepreneur that is making your way up the ladder. We're increasingly at risk of having housing haves and have-nots. That great Canadian dream that every generation had a better shot at succeeding is fading away right now. And we need to do something about that. So what are the main reasons that it's harder to get a home when we ask these home buyers? Well, price of housing, obviously, saving for the down payment. They were worried about the job market. I think that's improving, but it was still very much on their scale. A lot are emerging from our post-secondary system with significant student debt that impairs their ability to borrow for a home. And of course, the fifth thing that they told us, the number of homes being built is too few in the marketplace. So June election date, Ontarians are telling us that they want to see all the political parties act on this. They believe we can do more. They believe there is a risk if we don't act that we may lose young talent. That's actually borne out by another survey we did at AREA that found more and more young people are looking to other provinces in the States just because of the price of housing. They have the opportunity now to work from home in many respects, and we may lose that talent of entrepreneurs and job creators to other jurisdictions based on the price of housing alone. And there's a strong belief that we need to increase housing supply. And I showed that to you earlier on how we have fallen behind. So our conjecture, David Oikel, he's the elected realtor leader of the Ontario Real Estate Association. I'm the head of staff. Had a great quote here. The previous election was about jobs, jobs, jobs. Remember Jean Chrétien talking about that? In very many ways, this next one is going to be about homes, homes, homes. We did find that a large number of Ontarians in the general population who are worried about getting into the market, moving up because they've got kids now demanding more room, or the parents thereof, would vote for a political party based on housing affordability as part of their platform. And 3 in 5 believe that leaders must do whatever they can to help increase housing choice, supply, and therefore affordability. Where does that lie in the spectrum? We asked them that too. Currently, Doug Ford and the PC party would be ahead in that respect. But interestingly and importantly, Andrew Horwath and the NDP just slightly behind in who can make housing more affordable. Stephen Del Duca and the Liberal Party were third on that. My guess is That's probably a read that they don't know much about Mr. Del Duca yet, what they stand for. So my gut on this, after 21 years in the arena, there are a lot of housing votes that are up for grabs that will actually move among political parties if they believe they've got a better chance of getting the keys to a great place to call home. It's that important to them. So what do we do about it? Well, Stephen, I'm sure we'll talk a bit about this in the Q&A, but here are a few of the things that we have put on the table. We believe that the core issue here is to focus on more housing supply and choice in the marketplace, big cities, medium cities, and in small towns. It's an issue everywhere. You can go to this link and you can check out the details on our research and our policy proposals. In fact, I'd encourage the Confederation Club to do so, because you can actually click on that and send a message to your elected rep. We can tell by your postal code who he or she is, so you could actually get involved and send a message what you like. I mentioned that earlier thing about the housing haves and have-nots and what background you come from, greater chance of owning a home. We do believe we should enhance the first-time home buyers tax credit. Once you get on that first rung of the ladder, it's easier to move up. It's harder to get in the marketplace. But for those that come from more challenged backgrounds, they don't have the bank of mom and dad to depend upon, we think that leveling the playing field to get in the market would be wise with an increase in that tax benefit. Okay, so what do we do? The number one issue, really, outdated zoning rules that come from the disco era, these 1970s, holdouts that work against new housing choice. And get into that in more detail. That's both for owned homes and rentals. We really need to cast those in the trash heap of history and help build new homes and try new things like laneway homes, small homes, and innovative new financing mechanisms. We need to lower the costs on development. There's some places, York region, I believe, is the highest, that you have about $150,000 in fixed costs, fees, taxes, permits, all that, $150K before you put the first shovel in the ground. So imagine how that translates to the ultimate cost of housing. Innovative home ownership models. There's modern technology that would be the 2022 version of rent to own, where you could have a co-investor, be it a pension fund, be it a bank, it could be an entrepreneur or even the government that helps you with the down payment, and you pay them off over time like rent to own, or when you sell, they get part of the upside. We have some 1970s rules that never imagined the internet, let alone this model, that are actually restricting that choice for Ontarians today. Get dirty money out of real estate. We want to see a public registry you can search that tells you who owns a property. Why is that important? Canada, particularly Ontario and British Columbia, have been a haven for dirty money from abroad. These could be corrupt political officials that are trying to hide their money in safe Western nations, or it could be criminals, drug dealers, arms runners that put their investments into property and hide in the name of a niece or a nephew. Right now, you can buy a property and hide behind the anonymity of a numbered company. We think that day has come to an end. The US, the UK, Europe, they've all brought up more safeguards to guard against the dirty money coming into real estate. And that makes us a greater target. We've heard positive things from Prime Minister Trudeau. BC has done this. We'd love to see it in the province of Ontario. We oppose any new tax on homes. It's already taxed enough as it is, and you cannot tax your way to prosperity. We'd also like to see more local flexibility on what housing needs are. Too often, governments take the simple approach of a one-size-fits-all straitjacket, envision the whole province looking like Yonge and Bloor, for example, and they impose the type of Toronto rules in Kitchener, Niagara, Northern Ontario, and that limits housing supply and choice. Allow more local flexibility. You're probably seeing this in your businesses, and I'd love to hear your feedback on where this is going. But work from home, either purely or in a hybrid model, will give business and government the opportunity to shrink their footprint. We see in commercial spaces, particularly retail and hospitality, an opportunity in some office to move those into residential or mixed residential commercial. There's a lot of surplus government land and buildings. In fact, the number one landlord in Ontario is your government with your tax dollars. You could convert those buildings and property into housing. It's environmentally friendly. It's already built on services. So let's get on with it. We believe a home renovation tax credit can help upgrade homes. A good example of this that the province has done to their credit, helping people who have seniors in their home renovate so grandma can move in. She doesn't have to go to a long-term care home. Those types of ideas, or people can stay in their home longer if they so choose. Transit-oriented communities give an opportunity to intensify around new GO stations, new transit or subways in the big city. And very importantly, if you give these tools to municipalities, you should reward those who open the toolbox and get to work, and punish those who close the toolbox and put it up on the shelf. You guys follow politics intimately. You wouldn't be part of this club if not. You know, in every federal and provincial budget, there's an infrastructure fund. So how about this for starters? If you want that new arena, you want the new transit system, you want the new water and sewer, well, those that are actually opening their communities, welcoming new homeowners, inviting new neighbors in, they go to the top of the list. You close your doors, you listen to NIMBYs, you chase out your youth, well, then you go to the bottom of the list. The province of Ontario, the national government have an enormous opportunity to incense positive behavior in municipalities to bring in new affordable homes through their infrastructure funds. So what do I see in the path ahead? I see government focusing a lot on sustained and broad economic recovery. It does look like we're moving through, knock on wood, COVID. We can focus on the future. Affordability of home ownership is emerging as a top 3 issue in our province and top issue for a certain cohort of voters who can move. What's the core issue? Lack of supply. The big villain, outdated zoning laws and unimaginative government policies. If we don't do something, there's going to be an awful lot of pressure for government intervention from the housing have-nots, and I don't blame them. That could be taxing those who have a home. It could be bringing in more rules and regulations. The best way to actually bring those keys closer to reach is to increase housing supply. And for Mark and all the people I have the honor to represent in the Ontario Real Estate Association, it will bring greater scrutiny on the profession. There's a lot of buyer frustration out there because they'll bid on 3, 4, 5, 6 or more homes and end up empty-handed. To the credit, and I think to ours, we did bring forward new legislation the province listened to, first Premier Wynne and then Premier Ford, to raise the bar when it comes to integrity, professional standards for realtors, and a strict disciplinary system. And Mark, I'm sure you'll agree with me. If you see somebody who breaks the rules, who takes advantage of somebody, who breaks the trust when it comes to something as crucial as your home, we want them kicked out of the profession. No more slaps on the wrist, we want them out. So it's another important part of the government moving forward, making sure we have the highest standards in North America on what is the most critical purchase for hardworking Ontarians. So I'll leave that up for a second. I know it'll be shared with you. If you have any follow-up for me that you want to do privately, there are my contacts, and I encourage you to follow the Ontario Real Estate Association. We're talking regularly about our #1 mission that motivated me from the beginning, helping to create that next generation of Kitchener-Waterloo and Ontario homeowners. So thanks so much. I'll pull that down at this point, and Stephen, happy to take any questions folks may have.
Great. Well, thanks, Tim. Some really interesting statistics and other material provided in your presentation. We're now moving to the moderated questions portion of the webinar. Some club members have pre-submitted questions for Tim, and if attendees would like to ask a question, please enter using the Q&A function, and we'll get to as many questions as possible. And I see we have one question that's come in already. First question, I guess they're looking to have you pull out your crystal ball. What do you think it will take for the Ontario housing market prices to finally peak and perhaps retreat? Do you think that there's a housing bubble that could pop?
I just saw Jackie in the chat. I'm embarrassed now. I didn't know it would close. I'm going to make sure that's open. We still got a few weeks before, or a couple months before the campaign. I want to keep the pressure on, so I'll fix that. So look, I mean, there's things that could happen that will grind things to a halt, but it's not going to solve our problem. So let's say, by way of example, that we have runaway inflation and mortgage rates go through the roof, and we go back to, you know, late 1970s, early 1980s that my folks had to deal with. I guess that will slow the housing market, but that means that, you know, the hardworking entrepreneur who she started up her company in Kitchener and is trying to buy a nice place, she's going to be out of luck. That's not actually going to solve our problem. I don't think we did see a more rapid acceleration, I think, when we came out of COVID for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's always uncertainty. So the market did go down at first and then came back up. But we did see a lot of people that decided to move into the market, quite frankly. Many people, because they didn't have to do the commute, worry about their clothes, out buying lunches. They built up their savings. So they were able to put that towards a home. COVID did drive that value of homeownership, Stephen, even more into our hearts. We saw it was a place of safety, security. I can have an office at home. So we saw a bigger demand, and Mark can back me up on this in KW, but across the province, people are looking for more space for that office, a yard to kick the ball around with their daughter or their son, right? Mm-hmm. So that increased demand. So I think, we're through that. But I do believe we'll still see an acceleration, an increase in prices province-wide in general in the time ahead. And the tools to bring that down, I think would, risk undermining our economy and stop people from getting the market. I will not lose my focus on increasing supply and choice in the marketplace. I want to see that curve that had gone up forever in Canada and went down, getting back up with more homeowners.
Excellent. The next question, there were a lot of great ideas in the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force that you're a member of. How much of the task force ideas have been adopted by the province, noting this just came out last month?
Yeah, so none, but wait, like that's, they've been consulting on it, and we hope to see some response from the government relatively soon. So let me give you some background on this, and thanks Stephen for raising that. RIA had actually suggested this task force, and the government not only obliged, but I had the honor of sitting on it. And Stephen knows this, and I suspect a lot of you folks do too from being interested in politics, but often when the government does a task force, they make two things, two errors, well, two choices. Sometimes they have like every stakeholder under the sun, and you all, sit around holding hands saying kumbaya, and then your report offends nobody, and it's a piece of vanilla fluff, right? So that's often what governments do. The second reason they can do task forces because they don't want to answer the issue. So they make this task force go off and study it for 2 years until the problem goes away, everybody forgets about it, right? That's another tool. This was the opposite. So Steve Clark, the housing minister, made it only 9 of us. So he made it very tight, none of this kumbaya chorus. Get down to work, give me the right ideas, what's going to solve the problem, no holds barred. And number 2, he said, get it done fast. So we actually started meeting before Christmas, and we finished after a broad range of consultations at the end of January. So I would expect actually quite soon, Stephen, to see the government's response to the task force, and whether it's going to be all at once or in pieces, that should be coming quite soon.
Excellent. There's a question online that's very similar to a pre-submitted question. There's been talk of eliminating blind bidding when purchasing houses. Can you explain blind bidding and the different options to blind bidding? And does OREA have a position?
Yeah, so I just, OREA, and I would have believed this in my public office and carry it with me today. Your home is your most precious asset. Precious as it's the greatest store of value. And secondly, there's nothing quite like it in terms of what it means to us emotionally of all the things that we own. I mentioned earlier, it's where you raise your family. We all have our fondest memories. And therefore, we believe that the homeowner should be in the driver's seat on how she sells her home. And generally, when you sell a home, it's to finance moving up to a larger home or for your retirement. So you should be in command of what happens there. We do not believe the government should dictate to people that they must sell their home this way. So one thing that happens in our marketplace today is you can choose how to sell your home. You can sell it yourself. There are no laws that say that you have to use a realtor. We obviously recommend it. You don't want to leave money on the table, experienced individuals, advocates, but you can sell on Kijiji if you want to. You can use an auction site and hire an auctioneer. You can use a realtor. You can sell it to your cousin. Those are your choices. So we believe in that choice across the board. So the term blind bidding, what does that refer to? It's really the traditional offer process. And under the laws in Ontario, Mark or other realtors cannot reveal the contents of an offer to other parties. That's the law of the land. Probably next to healthcare, your financial information is the most sensitive. So they're prohibited from doing that. So if there's, 8 people making offers on a home in Waterloo, the buyer sees those offers, but they don't go, the seller sees those offers, but they don't go to other buyers. And the reason is because of the sensitivity of the information. And then the decide, okay, I'm going to choose this offer or that offer. That's the way it works. In an auction process, it's all made public. All the offers are on the table. So the notion on public policy debate is we should ban the traditional offer process and only go to auctions. I already spoke about how you should decide how to sell your home, but here's a couple other downsides to that. In Australia and New Zealand, the auction process is quite common. Now, Stephen, it's not mandated, but they choose an auction in Australia and New Zealand, and it's increasing. And why do they do that? Because they believe it leads to higher prices. And so they get people bidding against each other. The emotion gets there. They got the, the adrenaline. I don't want to lose to that guy standing over there. I know them. I'm not going to be showing up by them. And people make rash decisions. And it's been demonstrated that prices are either the same or go higher because of auction fever. And you don't often have then the advice of your realtor who say, okay, calm down. It's going too high. Let's move on to another property. So we don't believe we should force it. Here's the last thing. So Stephen, if you said to my mom that, who was thinking about selling the family home after my dad passed away, right? That you have to sell your home by auction. You can't use a realtor or the traditional offer process like we've been using since Confederation. My mom's going to say, that's scary. I'm not going to sell my house. I'll just stay here. I don't know how these auctions work. I'm doing it in Australia. It's not the way that grandpa sold the house. So if you think you have an inventory problem now, it'll really dry up if you force everybody into a model that has not been part of our country's culture. Just leave them the choice.
Excellent. Next question. With rising home prices and rising real estate commissions, how do you view the noticeable increase in part-time realtors throughout Ontario? Is this a good thing or a bad thing, and why?
I believe that that people should make a choice in their realtor, and I'd always advise make sure you get a realtor who knows the neighborhood, who's going to be your best advocate, who knows what's going to be, there's a development coming up in your backyard, there's crime in that park, the school's great or it's crappy, right? So my advice is always to do your homework and get the person who's going to be your best advocate and knows the neighborhood cold. I tell you, Stephen, I worked in politics. I thought that was a bit of a dog-eat-dog competitive world. It's got nothing on real estate. It is intensely competitive. But if somebody wanted to have something because they've known them for a long time and they were successful in another career and got into real estate, right? That's their choice of what to do. Here's what I think. I think we need to make the education more demanding. I think we should make sure that the ongoing education that realtors have to do is not a simple check off the boxes. It should actually have demands, keep them up to their skills. That's what we push for at AREA. And if you don't do that, or if you break the rules, you rip somebody off, you don't follow the integrity of the profession, want them out of the profession. And we successfully lobbied for higher fines, greater discipline, and a greater ability of a regulator to give people the boot, to pull their license altogether. I think that's the best way to address this issue. As you can tell by my themes, I believe strongly that when it comes to your home, that you should make the choice of your realtor. You should make the choice of how you sell your home.
Absolutely. Let's see, we've got a question that's come online. Do you think vacant unit tax is a useful solution to housing problem?
I don't know. So I will say that any volt of energy, any ounce of effort that is diverted from the core issue on housing supply is probably not going to be as effective as if it went after the real problem. Like I think that I think it laid out the case very clearly that it's much better to treat the actual cause of the problem than symptoms thereof. And sometimes it's easier for politicians not to go after, stand up to NIMBYs vote. Maybe it's too hard to repeal those 1970s zoning laws. Maybe you want to give that rec center or the highway project to, a politically sensitive riding as opposed to a community that's actually trying to welcome new homes. Like I get all that stuff. And then the politicians turn to, well, let's go after this tax. Let's just tax our way to affordability. I just don't think you can. So will that work? Maybe. I don't think it's, the best option. It will take some use of resources in the municipality to actually determine how long you were in your home. So I think we're talking about second or third tier solutions. We can wait and see, but I would really love it if our leaders focused on the core issue, and that's inventory supply.
Absolutely. Next question. Does AREA have a position on the federal government potentially eliminating the capital gains exemption on principal residences or increasing the capital gains inclusion rate, currently 50%, for other real estate property sales?
Yeah, we hate it.
Okay.
We go to war on that, right? I mean, Mark would have to leave the Confederation Club and take up a pitchfork and a torch and storm Parliament on that one. Look, that would be the atom bomb on the savings of the Canadian middle class, right? We have been promised that when we bought our home and we retired, that we could count on the value of our home in our retirement, help out our kids, whatever. And to betray it like that and bring in a whopping new tax, that would be an awful betrayal, and we would fight it like hell. Look, if you've got other investments, you've got rental properties, secondary residences, right? The tax is there. But that has been such a lasting hallmark of Canadians, has actually built our middle class. Man, that would be awful. But I do want to say, I'm glad you raised it, Stephen. It is a threat. It is a threat. When politicians spend, the next verb that they look at is tax, tax, tax. And some may see that as a big fat target that they will go after to finance overspending instead of making tough spending choices. There has been too much talk in Ottawa, including the former head of the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, about this. We see it as a legitimate threat, but we will go to war on it and stand up for Ontario and Canadian homeowners.
Great. Over the past couple of years with a very hot real estate market, most homes are being sold without home inspections. What are the risks?
Yeah, that's a great one for Mark, who does the day job, right? I'm more of the advocacy side and helping run the operation. And that's a conversation you should have with your realtor. But, you're making a pretty big purchase here, right? And I appreciate the pressure. And some are doing, pre-inspections so you can check those out. But I think that's a conversation that you have with your realtor. And Debbie and I bought our home in Toronto in a slightly different market, but I wanted to make sure I knew all the challenges ahead. Hey, Mark, can I throw to you on that one? That's more in your bailiwick than mine.
Sure, Mark. Unmute yourself if you can.
I'm here. Absolutely. That's a good point, Tim. And what I'm seeing today is the vast majority of home buyers buying without a financing condition, and B, buying without a home inspection condition. Because if they come forth in a multiple offer competitive situation, any conditions, there is no possible way they're going to win. What I have seen a few people do, and my role is more listing and selling homes. I do help buyers, but they're usually clients of mine that are sold. What I've seen a few people do is, before the competitive offer process begins, they will go in with a home inspector. They'll actually have to pay that home inspector maybe $400, $500, $600, $700, but they're taking the risk. So then when they bid on that home, they know exactly what they're bidding for. And if they don't get it, they've blown that money, so be it. The other thing I've seen, and a lot of home inspectors are pushing this, and they have for quite a while, is what they call pre-listing home inspections, where the seller does a home inspection before they list the home and displays it or posts it for every buyer to see. The challenge I've found with that, when I'm working with buyers, is quite often they don't trust that home inspection because it's not coming from their chosen home inspector. So basically, a lot of people are looking at a home today, taking a friend through or a tradesperson they know to get their opinion on it before they get into the bidding process. And they're going in with no conditions, and they have to win.
Yeah. It takes me back to that chart I showed that showed the buyer's market and the seller's market. It'd be nice to get to that balance, because then people have the time to do that consideration. They get the home inspection, and hopefully agree with that, Mark. The only way to get there, though, is you got to increase inventory, right? To restore that balance between the buyer and the seller.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I believe real estate is our purest form of free enterprise today, and it's totally about supply and demand. And until the supply catches up with demand, we're going to see escalating prices and tight markets, and we just have to build. We've been making good increases the last couple of years in building, but we need to continue to pour that on.
Excellent. Okay, next question. Do you think real estate commission percentages should be reduced in view of the spiraling selling prices?
So as I mentioned earlier, there is no more competitive business that I've seen, and I got to see a lot in my times in politics, and the fierce thrust and parry in the Ontario legislature than real estate. So the reality is that you've got commission structures right across the board, and you'll see some that the market on their commission, you'll see some that will market on their services. So I think people should make their choice based on what they want. I do not support government intervention in determining that. Let there be a broad array in the marketplace for what you get for the commission and what you get in return with result to services and marketing.
Excellent. Next question, you actually already addressed partially in your presentation. How do municipal zoning laws, along with an increasing number of stakeholder studies, combined with an overall increase in bureaucratic red tape, contribute to the obstruction and long runway for new building permits?
Worst. Oh man, that's like a terrible combination of things. So the questioner just pointed, but it's sadly the reality, and that's why we fell so far behind. You know, Stephen, in some parts of the province, it can take 10 years to get a permit through to do a development, right? That's not a single home, but a development. 10 years. Imagine the price inflation that happens over that time. And while you can't move the house, you can move the investment money. So we've seen home builders in our province say it's just too tough in Ontario, and they build down in the States or other provinces. You know, here's an example that works in largely urban areas, and we call it exclusionary zoning. So here's an example of how outdated zoning laws work against affordability. So picture a wartime bungalow in Kitchener, right? And it's past its prime, a little worn out. And currently the property owner in our cities can buy that home. She can knock it down and build a 4-story mansion, you know, for a wealthy family. And that's their right. They own the property, right? They've earned it. God bless. But if that same owner said, you know what, I got some property here, knock down the wartime bungalow and build a duplex or a triplex or townhouses, something that, you know, new home buyers could afford, they go through this red tape ringer and delay and process, and all the NIMBY forces descend, and that project never gets built, and those 3 or 4 families are SOL in getting a place. The developer throws up her hand. So what we say is have a level playing field. They want to build up, you know, great, that's allowed, that's their home. But if they actually want to provide housing that families could afford, they should be able to do so. We think that alone will unlock a lot of affordable home ownership, particularly in our medium-sized cities and our large cities.
Excellent. There's 2 more questions. They're very personal type questions, unless something else comes in online. First one, what difference are you finding in lifestyle in your current position compared with all your years in politics?
Does that come from somebody in politics or aspiring to get involved?
It might be.
So there's something, Stephen, called a weekend that you know I wasn't really aware of, or I lost sight of. It's usually a Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, I love my time in public life, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And whatever, you know, party you come from, I found that the politicians did it because they believed in their community, want to make a difference, or they believed in a cause, and it was invigorating that way. And you're one of the few, you know, 132 people who have a microphone and a desk and can use that to fight for what you believe in or why people sent you there. It's tremendously rewarding. To get there, though, there is a cost, right? It is you are always on, you are always accountable. I found, you know, by and large, that the people were very respectful. They saw my wife and I out for dinner out with the kids. You know, they didn't come over and start slamming the table, but, you know, you were in the spotlight and people would talk to you. And that was a great barometer, and you get paid for that as part of the job, but it can wear you down. I do think, quite frankly, that there were times that I could have been around my eldest a bit more, that I missed out because of the job that I'm now enjoying with my youngest. And then the constituency work, you know, in ridings like Kitchener-Waterloo or Niagara, if you don't serve the constituents, they're likely to give you the boot next time around. So that meant your weekend, you know, was spent doing things that were rewarding: tours, anniversaries, you know, birthday parties, public events, but it also meant you didn't have much downtime. So the biggest change I find: more time with my family. I have more time to myself and don't have to worry about every crisis in the province, just real estate. And you're also the biggest other difference. I'm probably going along about this, but I appreciate the question. In politics, you're a constant generalist, right? You've got to know a little bit about everything, and you could be called on the carpet for one day, from healthcare to alcohol to policy to crime. You never know what your day is going to be. When you're in a specialist category, it's much more, predictable, and you can do a deeper dive. So that's another big change, and I appreciate that personal question from somebody in the audience.
Excellent. We do have a question that's come in online. It's a loaded question. Which party is the best party to vote for if housing is the only issue? Which will be the deciding factor for who I will vote for?
Oh man, see, that's really putting me in a tough spot. And I should have said this at the beginning, Stephen. Having spent 21 years there in question period, I'll bring back that old rule of question period. That there's a question I don't like, I'll just answer a different question altogether. But yeah, I mean, I've got to be careful there in terms of what we do is we do work with all parties, and we then put that out for the public. We'll analyze the policies, we'll put it out for the public, we'll put it out for members and say, okay, here's what all the parties are doing, and you decide. So I'm not trying to dance around that. I think appreciate the position that I'm in, that I need to maintain good relationships with all parties, and we're honest about it. I'm happy the New Democrats have actually put forward the housing platform early. There's a lot of stuff in there that we put on the table that they liked. There's other things that I might not like about certain parties, but we'll lay that out for voters to decide right there.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Tim. Really appreciate answering all the questions. We'll now transfer back to our host, Barb, who will formally thank our speaker.
Thanks, Steve. Oops. Wanted to just get through this. Just give me a moment here. Got something exciting to share with you guys. Tim, on behalf of the Confederation Club, I would like to sincerely thank you for taking the time to speak with us this evening on this topic. It's such a hot topic, and it really does affect everyone. So thank you again. It was really informative. And I will make a point of sharing the deck that you presented this evening with our audience. So stay tuned and check your inbox. As well, we will have the recording. So if you want to see anything that you've seen tonight or to share it with friends and family, certainly we would invite you to do that. With respect to our next presentation, we do have it lined up for next month, and we're going to be hosting David Mescal, CEO of the museum, where he's going to be talking about the Rolling Stones Unzipped tour and the exhibit at the museum. So super exciting to have David. He's quite a leader here in the Kitchener-Waterloo community, and he's really, punched above his weight in terms of bringing a world-class exhibit to Kitchener. And in advance of our presentation next month, which is actually going to be on Tuesday, April 19th at 7 p.m., he has graciously provided a discount code for our club. So if you guys have not yet gone to the museum to see Unzipped, I personally have, and it was spectacular. Make a point of, when you're buying the tickets, to enter in the discount code that you see on the screen here. If you don't catch it here, as I've mentioned a couple of times, this presentation will be recorded and you can check it out online. If you like what you've seen and heard, which I'm certain you have, and you want to join the Confederation Club, we are not taking online payments quite yet, but we're getting super close to being fully digital. In the meantime, shoot us an email at confederationclub@gmail.com, and we would love to have you join up as a member. We appreciate your participation. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Have a good night.
Good night.